In studio with me, the Admiral Bill Stubblefield, and we used to call him the Sarge. Delegate Mike Height. The delegate word kind of supplanted the Sarge thing, but when you and Bill were on each Monday together, it was the Sarge and the Admiral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the wingman, we couldn't decide who was a wingman and who was a pilot, but we were wingmen.
Well, I think you decided who the pilot was, Bill.
Yeah.
Bad idea, Captain.
Bad idea, Captain.
In studio as well, Mike Carl. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good to be with you again.
It's been a while, about a month.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I won't say anything about the Cardinals and Pirates, but
Yes, you will. Yes, you will.
The Pirates just passed the Cardinals on the way down.
on the way down.
Yeah. And Larry Schultz. Good morning, Lawrence. Oh, your
Great to be here
microphone
again.
needs to come
Where?
down there. Yeah. We didn't actually. We should have moved your camera around.
Great to be here
We'll do that
again.
later. And also via telephone, Joseph Joey Torts ready. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, everybody.
I was looking back. I think this is the first time since mid-June the Friday Five with this specific makeup was in studio together. So,
Wow.
Gentlemen, it's been a while. Welcome back.
I'm waiting to hear what our chat room says about this.
Never mind the chat room. Let's see what I have to say about this. Let's see. It's been 3 weeks since I've written intros, so I have to say this beforehand. Because the Admiral gave me so much material to work with, his is going to be the longest of the intros, which is not unusual anyway.
That's bad.
But he's not the first one up. That goes to Larry Schultz.
And go a little something like this. Hit it.
He's been gone a couple weeks, I think up north of the border, in a place where they don't try to convict Trump as a routine point of order. They say where there's smoke, there's fire, and Canada has a bunch. But that's not what Larry wants to talk about, at least that's my hunch. I think he wants to say the Donald's expiration date is way past its prime. And as for his day of reckoning, he thinks it's just a matter of time. So if you want to bring charges against Donald Trump today, get in line, is what I think Larry Schultz will say.
Exactly correct.
Yes, Bill, you're about
I was going to say he has not lost his touch in those 3 years. 3 weeks.
Mr. Height, you're up next. He doesn't trust justice, and I'm not talking about Big Jim, who wants to be a senator, but whose personal financials are a little grim. He doesn't trust IRS justice any further than he could throw her, now that two have stepped forward in the role of whistleblower. Mike Height has made his living, showing off that furrowed brow. He told you they were protecting Hunter Biden, and you're about to learn how.
Amen.
Mike, it's time for you.
Thank you.
He was in the nation's White House when Nixon insisted on tapping telephones, even those which were unlisted. He was in the nation's White House when Nixon was not a crook, right up until the final helicopter ride Dick and Pat Dunn took. But recently, life imitated a Seinfeld episode. You know the one that fits, where George showed up for work, even though he called it quits. Yep, Mike Carl had thought he'd seen all there was to see until last week, when Bob Huggins declared, "I didn't quit, Gordon Gee."
Pathetic. Right.
Joe, you're up next, my man.
Joe's muted.
Yeah, he's not now. I just
Okay.
unmuted him. I accidentally knocked your button off. Why is Joe Ferretti reporting for work today and not out having fun? Why is he not fishing or golfing or biking or going for a run? I think I know the reason, and I think I know it well. He's got the same problem we all had this week. Do tell? That Powerball jackpot was worth $1 billion prize. But poor Joe matched just one number and not the other five.
Amen.
God, we missed you, Rob.
You should have got at least a third, Joe.
Ready, Bill?
I'm ready. I stayed awake all night in anticipation.
All right. It's to the tune of Casey at the Bat. I want you to picture Bill Stubblefield wearing one of those old 1890 uniforms with a bee swatter.
With a beach swap.
'Twas hot and humid by the river that one July day when the bees had been a-gathering in their swarming kind of way. The problem could no longer be ignored once the missus felt the sting. "Kill the bees," yelled Bonnie with all the muster she could bring. First up was a call to the handyman to whack away the hive. But an angry mass attacked, and into the river he did dive. The exterminator followed, but quickly he did leave. when those angry bees figured their way right up into his very sleeve. With 2 down, none gone, and no bee relief in sight, the only option remaining brought his bee suit to the fight. The first attack was on the worker bees, and success was quickly had, followed by a move to split the drones, which quickly got them mad. The first counterattack, they say, happened at 6:45, they say. The Admiral answered back and swatted most of them away. But as day turned to night in a battle as bad as ever seen, there was just one remaining, and that was the Beehive Queen. The Admiral eyed the Queen and declared, "It's you or me." What happened next was something he clearly didn't see. The Queen flew right at him to see what would come of this, and Bill experienced the pain from his first huge swing and a miss. Attack number 2 was targeted toward his rear. Again, Bill swung mightily, but came up with nothing but air. Down to his last strike, the Admiral knew he had to dig in. As the Queen circled back, he couldn't miss again. She turned up her stinger and charged with such great force. A man against a bee, setting nature to its course. Oh, somewhere Bill is wishing that he was still captaining that boat, because the mighty Stubblefield swung and missed again and got stung right in the throat.
Well done, Rob. Well done. You have a gift for that. That's very nice.
Now, that's my Mona Lisa of work right there.
It was. You'll never top that.
I can't top that
Yeah.
one, and I'm not going to try to. That one there will officially retire all future introductions going forward.
Are you serious?
Because I can't top that, Bill.
Oh, yeah, but forget about it. But you got to do the introductions. They're too much fun.
I can't top it.
Yeah.
I can't accept anything less than excellence, Bill.
Do you realize if you get rid of the introductions, we're not going to have any listeners to this Friday morning show? They're not coming around for us.
We'll
They're
have a
coming
lot
around for
more
the
time. I
introductions.
just killed 15 minutes. Go ahead, Mike.
I'm sitting here following on Facebook as well. Damon Wright says Bill's intro is about as long as his questions.
Oh, my.
Wait till you get on next time, Damon.
Joe, as always, you are the leadoff hitter.
Rob, don't worry about not being able to top that because Bill gives you so much material.
Bill does give me material.
Thanks,
Okay,
Joe.
guys, look, we're all political junkies at heart. That's one of the reasons why we're on the show. And I thought looking at the campaign finance reports that were just filed with the Secretary of State's office for the last quarter, which is April through June 30th of this year, I thought it was interesting to see how our candidates for the 2 major offices that we really have our eyes on, U.S. Senate and the governor's office, how the campaign financing is going, because clearly fundraising is a kind of a tale in terms of how these candidates' races are shaping up. So if we look at the U.S. Senate real quickly, the last quarter, Jim Justice raised $935,000. Mooney raised $411,000. Both of these individuals have a lot of money on hand. Governor Justice has over $800,000, and Mooney has $1.5 million. Of course, owing to the fact that he jumped into the race very early and began his fundraising early. And we also have to understand Mooney has that Club for Growth money out there. They committed $10 million to West Virginia that could be spent at any time by that PAC. Of note, CNN reported earlier this week that Mooney has been unable to convince Donald Trump to endorse him, despite visiting with the former president on 2 different occasions. How does that affect that race? And in the governor's race, Morrissey has raised $1.3 million this last quarter. He spent $294,000, has $1 million on hand. Moore Capito raised $288,000, spent $124,000. He has $1 million on hand. And J.B. McCuskey raised $120,000. He's got about $400,000 left. Chris Miller, who is pretty much self-funding, I reportedly loaned his campaign $3 million. I guess selling cars is a good business. He has $3.5 million on hand. And I refer you all to the Chamber of Commerce poll, which just came out on the governor's race, to give some context to these numbers. Morrissey, 31%, Capito, 30%, Mac Warner, 9%, with only 17% reporting undecided even this early in the game. So looking at the fundraising numbers, fellas, how does this impact your thinking about these two prominent races in West Virginia?
All right, the man that understands numbers as well as anybody in this room is the guy that's in charge of the taxes of this state of West Virginia at one point along the way, Michael Carl.
Well, those are large numbers and big leads for those people. It's going to be one of the most fascinating election playouts, the primary, and then of course the general election at all levels. But those two races particularly, I have no predictions except that if something blows up on Justice's side, I think it's more. I'll say it's more likely that something scandal blows up on Justice's side than on Mooney's side. But either way, it could make a difference. And what Manchin finally declares will have a big influence, because I that's one of my sub issues is I don't know who is a stronger candidate against Manchin. Probably Justice, but there's a lot of uncertainty and question marks waiting down the road for Justice with all the stuff that's going on and with his life.
Joe, did you cover how much money Manchin has? Obviously, he wasn't needed for the primary.
That's a good point. That's a good point, Mike. Manchin is sitting on $10 million. Of course, he's not doing a lot of fundraising right now because he's undeclared in terms of what his intentions are. But he has a $10 million war chest.
All right, the only person in the room that can identify what it's like to sit on $10 million is Bill Stubblefield. Bill, go right ahead.
No way, Rob. That's fantasy again.
Am I insulting you again? Is that too low?
It's too low, right? Yeah. One of the other aspects of both of these races is that all the candidates are fairly well known. They've all held public office. They're recognized. And so it's not going to be this aspect of introduction as a new candidate going to start catching fire as they become better known. I'm not sure there's much leverage or much maneuvering room here, because each one of the candidates has established themselves for their strengths and weaknesses, and they're fairly well known by the voters. So I don't know really what the money's going to play. It's going to become a negative campaign on both the governor's and the Senate race. It's going to be very, very, very negative. And stations such as WRNR are going to benefit.
Larry?
Yeah, it certainly does portend when they have this much money to spend. There's only so many good things they can say about themselves without having to switch over to saying bad things about the opponent. And so there could be a bloodbath, and of course your previous guest, Mr. Miller, could be the beneficiary of some of these, or Mr. Williams could be the beneficiary of these attacks. There are things that could happen with Jim Justice that are a little more consequential than a couple of negative ads. I don't know if there's anybody in a position to actually desire to enforce the tax laws of this state harshly and completely. But if they did, Jim Justice could very well have a problem. The average West Virginian pays his or her taxes, and they may be a little upset to fully find out the amount of money that Jim Justice has not paid. That could be a big negative for him, and I assume that a lot of these millions of dollars that his opponents hold are going to be spent making sure every West Virginian understands every line of every tax return and every form that he's ever had to file. I presume that's going to be the focus of a lot of this money in the Senate race. On the other side, it's a more of a name recognition thing. I don't think there's huge unknown negatives about all these players. The negatives that there are, such as they are pretty well known already. And so I don't see that as playing as big a role in the governor's race.
Mr. Haidt.
I see the senatorial race definitely being a bloodbath, and I look at the money both of them have, and it's going to go negative. There's going to be a lot of money spent on that particular race, which just helps Manchin if he decides to run for Senate again. The interesting thing about Mooney is, and never count Mooney out, and you talk about he didn't get the endorsement from Donald Trump. Well, I don't think Justice has gotten the endorsement either. So if Trump decides to stay out of this race altogether, I don't think Mooney really needs that endorsement, as long as Justice doesn't get it as well. So early on, everybody thought Justice was going to run away with this, and I just don't think that's the case anymore. He's got enough negative baggage that Mooney will expose that this could be a very close race, and I would say it's a toss-up right now on that regard. The governor's race is a little different, and I don't know that I agree with you, Bill. I don't know that it's going to go as negative. I don't think it'll go as negative as the senatorial race, and I just don't know how negative it'll go. And I say that because I think the candidates that are running are quality candidates. There's just not a whole lot of negative baggage there that you can throw. There's not going to be a lot of mudslinging, I don't think. They'll try to differentiate on policy issues, I think, but there just won't be a whole lot of bloodbath. I will also say I am extremely surprised at the gains that Moore Capito has made in this race. Early on, I thought Morrissey was going to run away with this, and that has just not been the case. That you have seen, and I haven't seen where Moore Capito spent a ton of money yet either. So for him to have the gains that he's had this early on without spending a bunch of money says a lot about his strategy and his name recognition, and that he is just a quality candidate. If anybody knows Moore Capito, this is a genuinely good guy. So I look at anticipation of how this governor's race really plays out, especially on the Republican side, because whoever comes out of that, I think it'll be a great race against Steve Williams as well. But I think the Republicans going to have definitely the upper hand.
Mike, you made a good point about all the candidates being a well-known and people of principle, and you may well be right that it's not as negative as what we found in the Senate race. How do you see the governor's race playing out as far as issues? Is it going to be more social issues, or is it going to be more infrastructure issues? Because a couple of the candidates have made their platform on the infrastructure side. 3 or 4 of the others, though, are moving toward the social issues.
I don't know. I would say that most candidates aren't going to probably bring up social issues unless they think that there's a benefit, or unless someone else has directed a question in that area. I would think that most of them will try to steer away from controversial issues and focus on the fiscal and policy issues. So, I mean, that would be my recommendation anyway.
Back to you, Joe.
Yeah, I think Mike Haidt broke down the governor's race very well, and I agree with all the points he made there. On the U.S. Senate side, I will disagree with him on one point, and that's about the Trump endorsement. I think that Mooney is in greater need for that endorsement than Jim Justice is, because Jim Justice goes into this race as a statewide candidate, a successful statewide candidate. Mooney has never been a statewide candidate, number one. Number two, if I look at the donor list under Jim Justice, I see a lot of the power brokers of the Republican Party in the state of West Virginia. I see names like Mark Blankenship, Greg Thomas, Conrad Lucas. When I see those names getting behind a statewide candidate, I have to believe that the Republican Party in West Virginia, the apparatus of that party, is going to be working for the governor. And absent something blowing up in the governor's face, and I agree with Mike Carl, that's always a risk with this governor, but absent that, I think Mooney needs the Trump endorsement to overcome that home field advantage. And if he doesn't get it, the polling that we've seen so far suggests he's going to lose by 10 to 15 points. So that's the only thing I take issue with, Mike, is I think the Trump endorsement is almost critical for Mooney to overcome that problem that he has running as a statewide candidate for the first time.
Well, this could come down to Baby Dog versus Lala, and my money's on Lala.
That's going to be an interesting competition.
And is it clear, sometimes this is confusing for folks, is it clear that Mr. Mooney, should he lose this primary, will no longer be in the Congress? Or can he then switch back and run for his congressional seat?
I think it's too late to sign up. I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes,
By the time
I
the
think
primary-
You'd have to be running for
Okay.
both simultaneously.
that's right.
Yeah,
I mean,
and you can't.
I could see a segment of the population that's not happy with Mr. Mooney's performance as a congressman saying, this is great, because no matter what happens, he's not going to be our congressman anymore.
That's correct.
And he announced for Senate within days of when he was, reelected to
Yes.
the House.
Yeah.
I think your point, Larry, is more toward his detractors, but if you look at Alex's reelection numbers, they're very impressive, among the most impressive numbers of any Republicans in the state. So while there are some who complain about Alex Mooney, he does win reelection impressively every single time after that very first one, which was the multi-member race where you had to kind of thin a giant herd to get to Alex eventually winning that with a very small percentage, but that hasn't been the case since. Joe, your point is a very good one. I think it's something to remember too, because if we were to do a poll right now in the Eastern Panhandle, and for all of our listeners and viewers, who is the other person elected to Congress from West Virginia? You don't answer in the room,
Right.
but who is the other person elected to Congress from West Virginia? If you can come up with that name, that's pretty good. But I'm going to guess most people can't, and that's the problem Alex Mooney faces in the other end of the state.
But well, of course, if you were in Charleston or something, they say who represents us in Congress, it wouldn't be Mooney, it'd be Miller.
Yes, that's my point.
Yeah.
Your congressman or woman is known to you in your area, most likely, but the other ones in the state, or in this case, other one, not much.
If I were advising Donald Trump, I would stay neutral in that race.
Yeah, but
He didn't have anything to gain. He would just antagonize some.
And he's
of
done
his-
that before.
Some of his supporters.
He's stayed out when it's
Yeah.
two people that he
Right.
has endorsed previously.
But until the congressional districts were redrawn, Moon was representing Kanawha County.
yes, but
so
he wasn't
so
representing the entire state, though, is my point.
You're exactly right, but he wasn't.
and
he wasn't introducing a large
and
segment.
that's
of
the
that,
extraordinary
yeah.
part about his, winning that election was just that.
Yeah, that's a fair point there. Hey, we're down to our final seconds. Joe, any final thoughts?
No, I think it bears watching how these campaign finance reports roll in. We'll get another report coming up at the end of September. Money is everything in politics, and we'll see how these guys do show support by the numbers that they are able to post online.
Admiral, you're on the clock. First up in the 9 o'clock hour after the break here. And Mr. Stubblefield and I will be joining Mr. Staggers for lunch today and sampling some of this cake. And I have to tell you, Bill, I've never tasted cake like this before in my life.
And I'm not sure sampling is the right word. We will consume that cake.
Yeah. So, gentlemen, you're welcome to stop by and have lunch. It's a cake to remember. And the gentleman in this particular case would be the Admiral Bill Stubblefield, Mike Carl, Michael Haidt, Larry Schultz, and via telephone, Joseph Joey Torts for ready as we prepare for hour number 2. And we go to the Admiral to start this. Oh, and by the way, I should point out, Damon Wright notified everybody on our comment section. Tony Bennett has passed away at the age of 96. I believe he would be the last man standing from that era of the golden era of the crooner, right?
Yeah.
Bill?
And a gentleman throughout, I guess.
Indeed.
As I said, toward the end, dementia, but he's always had good words to say about everybody. Good man.
Issue number 2.
Okay. The good senator from Alabama, the ex-Auburn football coach, has put a hold on promotions in the military, all flag ranks. Ones coming into the flag and also those within the flag rank. For the first time in about 150 years, we do not have a commandant of the Marine Corps. The Republicans have always viewed themselves as the supporter and the backers of the military. My question is, who is Senator Tuberville hurting the most, the military or the GOP?
Let's start with, first with our military members in the room. Delegate Michael Haidt.
I would say, to answer your question, I would say he is hurting himself and the GOP more than he is the military. The one great thing about our military and the structure it is if the man at the top goes, that there's people underneath of him that can pick up the responsibilities and keep moving on. That's the way our military is built. So not having a man at the top hurts a little bit, but the people underneath of him know how to pick up and keep marching on. So it definitely hurts himself. He looks bad in this situation, and he's making the GOP look bad as well.
Michael Carl.
I completely agree. I think it's absolutely absurd to have a structure that this one member of the Senate can do this. It just shows it more than anything. It reflects a potentially fatal flaw of our governmental structure, that this can be done. And it's just ridiculous, but I agree that, in the short run, it's hurting the Republicans more.
Joe Ferretti.
There's always room to debate policies, programs, and protocols that we have in our military if they cross that divide into the realm of cultural issues and things of that nature. I mean, we've gone through this forever when we talked about women in the military and all the problems that were raised as a concern about that, and we seem to have implemented that very well. But there's always a tug and war over some of these issues in the military. But there's a couple things that should be sacrosanct when it comes to how our government approaches the military. Number one is funding, and number two is promotion. Those should be above the politics. And for this senator, by the way, if you want to feel good about your two U.S. senators in West Virginia, go on YouTube and listen to this guy, Tommy Tuberville. He should have stuck with college football coaching because really he's not an impressive individual. There's a couple handlers in the background which help steer him towards some of these issues, which I think must play well in his state. But overall, it's just not good for the military. And I agree with Mike Haidt. I think this is damaging to the GOP, just as is them loading up the Defense Authorization Act with a bunch of cultural stuff, like on transsexuals and things of that nature. The Authorization Act is passed all the time without much fanfare because it's just funding the military. And that's something we do to make sure we have a military that's ready for the issues of the day. So I think the GOP needs to squash this as quickly as they can. And I think Mitch McConnell is the guy who needs to pull Tuberville aside and explain to him how this is not good, and there's other ways to raise these issues that apparently are important to Mr. Tuberville.
Larry Schultz.
Yeah, this is culture wars insanity. It's, except that he doesn't look much like her. He's acting like Marjorie Taylor Greene, where there is nothing more important than that you hate this small segment of people over their gender issues or race or other things like that. It's simply not proper fodder to in any way reduce the readiness of the U.S. military. Mike Haidt is correct that we have a system, sort of by the nature of what militaries do, where you need to be prepared to go up to the next level, but that's not the way the system is supposed to work permanently. And he needs to get out, frankly. I don't understand how you could possibly equate the two things he's equating in this situation, and it's ultimately will affect the readiness of U.S. troops.
Back to you, Bill.
I agree with Mike Haidt that's going to impact the GOP more. I disagree somewhat that the military can function without leadership. If someone's in a temporary position, they're very reluctant to do anything anything different. You're going to keep the trains on the track on schedule as it was when they took over. You're not going to initiate a new program. You're not going to take on anything controversial because it's not your role as a temporary commander at that stage. So I think it is hurting the military. And the longer this goes on, the more it will hurt the military and our capability for defense. And the military, as all of us know, is in a very critical stage with the buildup of the Chinese in the South China Sea. We've got to be in a position not to be taken advantage of. And what Tupperville has done, I think, is making us very vulnerable in this one particular arena. Say nothing of what we have in Europe. So.
But do you believe it's hurting the military more? I guess was your
Oh,
question.
no. Yeah, no, that was my question,
Okay.
Mike, and I agree with you. It is hurting the GOP more, and I think it will because of this image the GOP has of being the friends of the military.
Sure.
And that's been torn apart right now.
Any other thoughts on this before we go to issue number 3? Then to number 3 we go, and Delegate Michael Height.
All right. So my question is, does the whistleblower testimony in the Hunter Biden investigation give credence to the DOJ IRS political double standards? So in other words, if you're listening to some of the whistleblower testimony, they're coming out and saying that they were hamstrung, they were not allowed to move forward, that they had recommended criminal charges, felony charges, as well as misdemeanor charges, and were told to pull back, and no charges were filed at all. So does this give credence that there's a double standard in the DOJ IRS?
Let me go to Joe Ferretti first. Joseph.
Well, I was struck by the testimony of the two whistleblowers. They seem to be very credible individuals, very concerned about how the investigation of Hunter Biden was conducted. So I give some credence to what they said under oath before Congress. Now, they were pulled in a number of different directions by the performance politics that sort of take over these hearings. But if you look at the substance of what they had to say, I thought it was interesting. I thought it warrants further investigation. But what I can't get past is that the U.S. attorney, whose investigation is the subject of these whistleblowers and was a Donald Trump appointee, has come out and said that he had free rein to do whatever he wanted to do in the investigation. He's already told Congress that in a letter, and I suspect after Hunter Biden appears before a judge with this plea deal that's been struck next week, after that is closed, Congress will summon this U.S. attorney to testify, and he'll be able to tell his story. So you have a real conflict here between these two whistleblowers and the very man who was in charge of the investigation at the U.S. attorney level. So right now, I don't know what to think in terms of the substance of what they've had to say, except to say that I thought that they appeared to be very credible witnesses when they testified. So I think it remains to be seen where this leads us in terms of ultimately whether or not the Hunter Biden case got a full and complete vetting before this plea deal was struck.
Michael Carl.
Well, I agree with the comments made up to this point, but I have a serious problem with all the emphasis on this U.S. attorney and who appointed him. He obviously has a separate personal career agenda that is not to advance Donald Trump's interests wherever he can, and so I have far less respect for him than I do these whistleblowers, and overwhelming. And I, as a lawyer, I know the burden of proof in a criminal case beyond reasonable doubt and all that. But on a political judgment, is there a shred of evidence that any part of the many millions of dollars that Hunter Biden received had anything to do with anything except his relationship to his father. And politically, you can approach it that way, and you should approach it that way. I understand it doesn't make Joe Biden criminally liable for bribery.
Larry Schultz.
In fact, it doesn't even make Hunter Biden criminally liable necessarily. The thing is that you have to, you're stuck with, in every case, the judgments of the appointed attorney who is handling the case. And, we wouldn't ask Katie Wilkes Delegetti to, you have to approach this in a certain way, and then the cops come forward after she doesn't file an indictment against somebody and say, wow, we had all the evidence. That's the judgment, the sole judgment of the DOJ and the attorney who's appointed by Donald Trump, as we've said, and who could have been replaced by Joe Biden day one. He could have replaced him, and he did not. He said, you're in this, you deal with it.
And why didn't he replace him?
Because he's an honest person. Because Joe Biden wasn't going to say, I'm going to pick my own lawyer to judge my kid's case. He said, I'm not picking it. Donald Trump picked the lawyer who will handle this, and let him go forward.
But how much does the DOJ actually play into this? I mean,
they have 100% control over
the DOJ,
over the bringing of charges, which is what you're saying.
Right.
Should have been done.
The Biden administration DOJ didn't bring the charges.
Through the actions of the Trump administration appointed attorney who's in charge.
And who was the attorney general at the time that happened?
I don't know. Was it Bill Barr?
It was Biden's guy.
Merrick Garland.
Well, okay, but even that guy doesn't have the power to tell that U.S. attorney, you can't bring these charges. That's up to the U.S. attorney. And that U.S. attorney, appointed by Donald Trump, decided that there was not sufficient evidence. Look, I bet you there's a lot of cases that don't get charged in our federal criminal justice system. There's a reason why they have a 99.6% conviction rate. All right, they're very careful, especially if someone is well known, but even if they're not, they're very careful not to bring slipshod charges that don't have proper evidence. That's where we are. And Joe Biden didn't fix this. It happened, and it happened with Trump's guy.
Bill?
Yeah. First, I think the whistleblower is an important concept, important mechanism, and they keep our government honest. So I'm a strong supporter of whistleblowers, as they are appropriately vetted. I find this to be a little humorous. If you look back 4 years ago, the Ukraine whistleblower, how the Republicans took a strong position. The Democrats took a strong position. Republicans were very critical of the position the Democrats took. Now with this one, everything's just flipped. The questions are the same. The issues are the same, except the issues are not the same, but the question's kind of the same. But the political parties are taking just the opposite position. As far as what I understand, the main criticism raised by the whistleblowers is that the whole process was slow walked. This slow walking actually took place while President Trump was president and Bill Barr was the Attorney General at the time. So it was. So you could make the case that there was ample time to bring this to conclusion, to accelerate the so-called slow walk if they chose to do so. They did not do so. So then it kind of moved over into another arena. Pointing all the blame toward one or the other, I think, is a mistake.
Go back to you on the phone, Joe. Anything else?
No, except I think, as we often have to do with these legal cases, we have to still wait and see about the investigation that Congress is inclined to conduct here. So we're going to hear from, I think his name is Weiss, David Weiss, I think his name is, the U.S. attorney from Delaware, and we'll see what he has to say about whether there was any interference from Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, or the Biden administration in terms of how he conducted his investigation and what he ultimately chose to charge.
Before we move on to issue number 4, which we'll do in a few minutes here, wrapping up this one, I've been texted by a former colleague who asked if the panel might want to contribute their feelings on the sale of the Washington Commanders football team and the elimination of Dan Snyder as an owner in the NFL. Speaking of controversial topics,
That'll be a short discussion.
maybe it may indeed be quite the short one there. But Mike Carl, I know you're a Washington, formerly Redskins, now Commanders football fan.
Well, I'm very happy that Snyder's out of it, and that we have a fresh start. You know, it's still a lot remains to be seen and how competitive they're going to be on the field. But this is a fresh start, and we needed this terribly.
The more you hear about Snyder, and I didn't know that this was possible, the worse it seems to get. I mean, each day seems to get worse, Joe Ferretti.
Oh, it's awful. All the people that have come forward and claimed sexual harassment and him cooking the books and all kind of other stuff that went on. 24 years of this as a formerly a Redskin and now I guess a Commander fan. You have to wonder what kind of penance that you had to do to endure this ownership. And you harken back to Peter Angelos and the Orioles too. You could see how owners can really sink a historic franchise like the Orioles and the Washington football team. It's amazing how much damage they can do. And I'm sure 99% of the people inside and outside the Beltway who have followed that football team for decades say good riddance.
There was a moment when people finally agreed that Snyder would not survive this, but it had nothing to do with any of the sexual misconduct allegations. It had to do with Snyder not sharing revenue he was supposed to share with the league. I heard any number of analysts say, listen, you can get away with a lot if you are an NFL owner, but you can't get away with cheating other owners of money. That's something that they won't forgive. And it's kind of fascinating to me that there was a lot going on that was kind of, seedy and dirty and disgusting. But the minute that he kept some money away from the owners, that's when the emphasis came on getting him out.
Yeah, I'm going to say, in full disclosure, I'm a Cowboys fan. And as a Cowboys fan, I am terribly disappointed that he's leaving this team. He has been the single most responsible person for the demise of this franchise since he bought it. And I have loved every second of it.
I have friends who are Giants fans, Eagles fans in the same division. And it, to me, has been remarkable to hear them say, geez, it's okay. He needs to go, but they wouldn't have minded had he stayed. But they're not all that upset that he's leaving because they're starting to see that he's like the erosion that he produces is greater than just the Washington Commanders. It's like the entire league is worse off because he was the owner. And so they don't take it on a game by game basis. They're saying the whole league is being hurt by this guy's very existence. It's time for him to go. I mean, they may regret that if they get a good owner who's not an insane person and go back to winning Super Bowls. But Snyder was never going to get over that hump.
Bill, final word is yours.
Yeah, the attitude going from considered the very best of the best or the elite, which they were under Jack Kent Cook, to where we are today with the Redskins / Commanders is just nothing short of amazing. It's a total reversal of attitude toward the team in a relatively short period of time. He should have gone long ago.
And on that note, we'll take our half-hour break a little bit early, Dylan.
The genius, Elon Musk, has now lost half the ad revenue Twitter was generating when he took the company over, a year ago or a year and a half ago. How much more of his brilliance can Twitter stand before it folds completely?
Well, Bill, you are the Elon Musk expert in the room, as not that you're necessarily tweeting a lot, but you do have a Tesla.
I do have a Tesla.
What did you just say?
With or without the R.
Hold everything.
Without the R.
Back it up. I've been trying to get everyone to pronounce that properly, to conform with you, and you just blew it all up. I didn't know you could even do that.
Next. But when it comes to Twitter, I am not a Twitterer, so I don't know anything about it.
But you know a lot about Elon Musk.
I know, and he's a brilliant individual. And you may not like him. He gets he puts his mouth where he should not. He takes positions probably he should not. But as far as what he's done with a couple of major programs, Tesla and SpaceX, you cannot equivocate with the success. He has made the Tesla the largest selling automobile in the world, I think, right now, and they're going gangbusters. Did that, obviously the genius part did not translate to Twitter, but I'll let somebody else address that aspect.
And it is early on in the Twitter battle, but they are taking on water, it would appear there, Mr. Haidt.
Well, taking on water. So, poor Twitter, before he came in, was making $5 billion in ad revenue, and poor Twitter is only doing about $3 billion in ad revenue now. So
it's a 40% reduction.
Yeah, it is a 40%, but I have a hard time feeling bad for a company that's doing $3 billion in ad revenue. Does it hurt his bottom line a little bit? Yeah, but I think he can take it, and he's only making $3 billion in ad revenue. I'm still having a hard time feeling sorry for him.
Well, there are other metrics too. Meta began its own similar type platform and reached a record number of users in a very short period of time. So it's not just the ad revenue. There are other indications that perhaps Twitter is not what it once was.
Well, and the other thing about Twitter, if you look at Twitter and you look at followers and who has the majority followers, these are not big conservative names. I think Barack Obama is the leading Twitter follower, followed closely by Justin Bieber and Taylor Swift. These are not great conservative names. So Twitter followers are still on the left, basically on the left. So I think what he's done is probably alienated those advertisers who want to advertise to the left. Again, $3 billion, who cares?
Mr. Ferretti.
Well, I think there's two trends here that are concerning for Elon Musk. One is the dip in ad revenue, and I think it's just a trend that you can't be happy with. I think the other trend for Elon Musk he has to be concerned about is the old adage, jack of all trades, master of none. He was and still is a master of the technology that is the EVs and SpaceX. I think he's done remarkable work, historic work in those areas. But as he spreads himself a little thin here because he wants to have this face-to-face fight with Mark Zuckerberg over at Meta, I think he's in danger of spreading himself too thin. Zuckerberg and his platform, which is called Threads, has a huge advantage. Number one, they got 100 million people to sign up in 1 week. And number two, they're tapping into the Instagram group, which is 2 billion users worldwide. Threads has an interface with Instagram, and it works very neatly so that you can actually post and text and upload information on both platforms, and they interface. And I've just exhausted my complete knowledge about this subject. But the point is,
well done, though, Joe.
That the point is that Zuckerberg has a huge advantage here, and just in terms of numbers. And Threads is soon going to be capturing a lot of that advertising revenue because of the 2 billion, again with a B, users worldwide in the Instagram platform. So I think that this is something that Elon Musk has to look at very carefully as to whether or not he wants to stay in this game, because I think he's going to lose when it comes to taking on Mark Zuckerberg, at least in this space.
Joe, Bill says he follows you on Instagram, wants to know when you're getting a TikTok account.
Well, I think Bill is stretching the truth there, because I'm not on any of those sites.
All right, Bill, sorry, I tried to.
You did well.
Not budging. He's not budging. Mr. Carl.
Well, I have very little to say because I have zero interest in social media generally, but I am, you cannot deny Musk's success as a business leader, and he has, in fact, if he's having any pushback or problems, it just confirms the absurdity of the whole system to me. You cannot deny Elon Musk's success as a business leader.
Nope.
And Mr. Admiral Stubblefield here understands from his stock portfolio how good he is.
Bill just looks down and shakes his head. Yeah. So it comes back to you, Larry.
Yeah, I wonder if Bill's stock portfolio includes Twitter stock. Because I can't. Yeah. No.
That's quick.
Bill's
I would lose
just
all
a little
respect.
bit smarter than maybe.
I'd lose all respect for Bill if he hated.
No, if the stock or the product already ends in an R, Bill doesn't know what to do with it, so he can't buy it.
The point that I would make is this: it is called social media, and my experience with people who are supremely intelligent on scientific matters is that sometimes their knowledge of the social aspects of our lives isn't up to speed. I think Elon Musk said, hey, I see that roadblock, I'm going to drive right through it. And now he's kind of rammed into something that he can't run over, and it's starting to smoke, and it may catch fire. I think Mr. Zuckerberg's gonna clean him up pretty clearly.
I want to point out how quickly this can all change. If you go back a year, people were predicting that Facebook wouldn't exist in a couple of years. It was an older user base. The young people had abandoned it completely. They no longer used it. Facebook had alienated even the people who were using Facebook. And now a year later, Facebook stock has been on a tear. It is because of Threads now back in the public consciousness as a social media force, whereas a year ago, some people were thinking it was going under. So don't bail on Twitter just yet, because these things change quickly. Now, I'll say this for Elon Musk. I think he's the unwilling CEO of a company he didn't really want to buy, but kind of had to, because he ran his mouth a little bit and ultimately got himself in a legal situation where he had to buy the company. I don't think he ever really wanted to buy the company.
Except I think Elon Musk wishes to be an influencer, and this was a way to become an influencer.
It was, but once he realized financially what he was getting into and where Twitter was, he wanted no parts of this company. He did everything he could to try to steer clear of it, but basically was legally forced to go through with the purchase of this thing. And this was a company that was already on the ropes because of what happened in the Trump situation. The conservative base of Twitter bailed on Twitter along with Donald Trump, and they're not coming back no matter how many restrictions Elon Musk removes. They're not coming back to Twitter, and that's the real problem there, is because about half the population in this country has been alienated by Twitter, and no matter what they do, that horse is out the barn. It ain't coming back, my Carl.
Well, I agree, but the whole world of it is crazy to me. And I just, have no respect for the people that, are obsessed with it.
Fair enough. We move on to final comment, Larry?
No, I'm fine.
All right. Final. So for issue number 5, then we go to Michael Carl.
And this, a lot of times when we ask questions, we have a ordained answer that we want to see, who will agree with it or not. But I don't, in asking this question, I don't have any such, presumption. And that is, if Biden gets out of the picture before the presidential election, by health or corruption or any other reason, who is the likely Democratic replacement for that role, other than JFK Jr. And that's an open question.
So, who would be the next likely Democrat to run for president?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
All right, that's a fair question, Mr. Stubblefield.
It will not be RFK Jr.
Okay.
He will not. He has something like 19% when he came in. He has 19% today. A lot of his dollars are coming from the other party. I do not think RFK Jr. would ever be a viable candidate on the Democratic side. My sense is if it was open, and right now I do not think any credible candidate is going to run against Joe Biden because that's not the way it's done. We did not see it in 20. Nobody ran against Trump as he was incumbent. We'll not see a credible candidate run against Biden right now. However, should Biden step out of the ticket, there will be some move to push Harris forward, but I think there'll be others that will move forward. Most notably, I think the governor from Michigan, Whitmer, will be the one that will get a lot of consideration.
Mr. Schultz.
I don't have other names besides Gretchen Whitmer, but there are always people in the Senate and the governorships of this country who would say, oh, I have no intention of running for president. And one day later, let's just say one obituary later, they're saying, I'm all about it. I've been wanting to do this all my life. So I don't think there'll be a shortage of candidates. And someone like Gretchen Whitmer has proven that she is a capable leader. I think some of these people are interested in waiting another term before they run. But I don't think there'll be any shortage.
Who would you like to see run? Let's put an addendum on Carl's question and add anybody that you would like to see run.
If something happened to Mr. Biden, because
yes.
I'm liking Joe Biden right now.
Right, but who would you prefer if he didn't?
Whitmer would be right up there. There are probably some senators that I can think of and some governors of other states who, especially, I'm trying to think, is it Utah that has a Democratic governor? There's a fairly conservative state that has a Democratic governor. Anybody who fits that and who's doing a good job as governor in that sort of turmoil would, by nature, probably make a pretty good presidential candidate.
Mr. Haidt.
Well, obviously, the first choice, and if we're talking about health or death, automatically Kamala Harris becomes the president and now is the incumbent and would hold, no doubt in my mind, she would run for the presidency and would get some traction that way, but I don't think she's a viable candidate, and I think there would be many people that would come out of the woodworks to vie for that position against her. And one that comes to mind very quickly would be a Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin hasn't said he's running for Senate yet. He's sort of holding back. And if something were to happen to Biden before January 1, when people start having to file for real, I can see Joe jumping in the race. And I think Joe Manchin would become an instant favorite if he were to jump into the race for president if Joe Biden is not there anymore.
At a general, I agree with you, Mike, but not in the primary. Joe Manchin could never survive the Democratic primary.
All right, Joe Ferretti.
Well, what's interesting about the question, let me answer the question first. I think, yes, Gretchen Whitmer, who has turned Michigan blue after a couple decades of Republican control in the state legislature, has proven to be a formidable candidate in that state, and also is now developing a nationwide reputation. Gavin Newsom, for all his problems in California, clearly has designs on someday running for president. He's a name that's going to be out there for sure. But when I look, and of course, Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota would be another I think, a serious candidate from the Democratic side. But when I look at the presidential primary listing from 2020, when Biden ultimately prevailed, I'm seeing names that have no shot just 3 years later. People like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. You could probably put Pete Buttigieg in there. Tulsi Gabbard, Michael Bloomberg. I mean, some of these people are off the map, and others just right now are not politically viable nationwide. So you could argue it's not a deep bench, just looking at who ran for president on the Democratic side in 2020. But I think the names most prominent would be Gretchen Whitmer and Gavin Newsom.
Circles back to you, Mike Carl.
Well, I have to say I'm interested in everything I heard, but I particularly feel closer to Joe's last comment. But ultimately, this is why Biden is the president now, because they didn't have any serious, strong national leader who wasn't a crazy, like the
AOC.
Right. So that just confirms my belief that that's the only reason we have Biden now, and if something happens that Biden's not in the picture, they're in real trouble.
I would say there's another reason we have Biden now, is that Donald Trump was viewed as an agitator and as an agitator primarily, and the country was looking for someone that would provide salve to this rawness that we had, and everybody viewed Biden as being a conciliatorial figure. So I think people were looking for some more quiet calmness that Biden provided.
Well, he's quiet, takes lots of naps. So.
Hey, Reagan took a lot of naps.
He did.
Hey, let's say.
And frankly, Biden's record on the economy is the equal or the better of Reagan's.
That is an absolute lie.
L-I-E
lie.
No way.
He created more jobs than the last three Republican presidents combined.
Because he eliminated more jobs.
No, that was Mr. Trump that eliminated
and their
those
wages
jobs.
have gone down in terms of
There we go.
economic value.
The jobs created stat, I think, has to be thrown out the window because of how many jobs were lost during the pandemic. So that's not a great
the pandemic
reference
that
point.
Donald Trump failed to lead on and told us it would be over
Our
in
country
15
was 1,000
days.
times better off when Trump left office than they are today.
State governors shutting businesses down is why we lost jobs. Had nothing to do with Trump. Nothing to do with Trump.
We had a national pandemic that killed 1 million people even after they shut
Right.
this down.
And
they
Trump-
would have killed a lot more had
Trump
they not shut these
allowed the
businesses
states
down.
to make their determinations, and it was the majority of the blue states that shut businesses down.
Right,
is
the blue
reason
states
why
that
we
run
lost
our
jobs.
national economy. Yes. Those blue states like New York and California that are the biggest players in our national economy. They were the ones who were careful enough to shut down some businesses. But that was just because Donald Trump didn't want to lead. He knew it was a problem. He said it'd be over in 15 days. How can you escape that?
And Florida is exceeding their situation of New York and California because they didn't shut down on a blanket level, and for a lot of other reasons, all having to do with being run by Democrats.
Larry, the last time I saw people jump as fast as Carl and Height did is when I put a little bit too much of that squirter fluid on the charcoal and the thing blew up on me. That's the last time I've seen anybody jump that fast.
Well,
But we needed
there's
this
all
today.
kinds of fear of getting burned. It's not just charcoal lighter.
Joe, we're going to circle back around to bonus issue number 6, and I'm going to go to you. You had 2 issues left, and both of them were pretty interesting.
Yeah, I thought. Well, look, we're lurching very slowly towards a special session, which appears to be scheduled for sometime in August. We know that the jailer issue is going to be front and center in that special session, but we also know that the governor could declare any other subject that he or his administration wants to cover in the special session. I'll pose the question: is there anything else that we think as a state we need to address now being in August, from a legislative perspective? I, for one, and I think the Democrats are right on this, they have come out, issued a press release and said, don't forget about foster care. We have yet to solve that problem. That should be on the special session. They also advocated for higher education funding, because as we continue to see these surpluses touted, we've got our flagship universities, Marshall and West Virginia, having to cut programs and fire people. Perhaps we should be looking at higher education funding also in this special session. So I'm just wondering if there's anything else that we think should be covered in August.
I have a delegate in the room, so I'm going to lead it off with him, Mr. Heights.
Well, I think absolutely the corrections issue will be addressed, and Delegate David Kelly seems to be leading the charge there and has for a long time in that area. And I think something will be done during special session about corrections. Foster care, there's 2 delegates in the House right now that are foster care parents and lead the charge on that during the session. I can see that being an issue if the governor puts it on the call, and I can see possibly getting something done there if that's addressed. The higher education issue is a non-starter. It won't happen during special session. Nothing will happen until January, and I'm not sure a whole lot will happen then, to be honest with you. If somebody can't finish their gender studies degree, I really don't care.
Come on, Mike. That's not
Mr.
the only thing.
Mr. Stubblefield.
That's not the only thing they cover in higher education. There's a lot of good programs that are at risk.
Yeah, but we're talking about cutting them. Which ones are we going to cut?
Well, you look at what the list that WVU has. Some pretty substantive programs, including some in law, some in engineering, some in mining technology and the like. A lot of good programs.
Those are all the ones they put on the list to scare everybody. Those aren't the ones that
Well, you don't know that, Mike. You don't know. You're buying into little bits and pieces you see on media news. You do not know. I think to add to that list are the schools, both the infrastructure, the buildings themselves, and also the salaries of our teachers.
Mr. Schultz.
I think that foster care is an important issue. We heard in a recent CLE that I attended, continuing legal education seminar, we heard from Charles Trump about Morgan County, where I live, and he does, that had some 163 referrals in a year's time from teachers, from pastors, from other mandated reporters, and did not have a CPS worker in the county. And so rather than using the system the way it was supposed to, they had the prosecutor in there trying to figure out from the reports that he had whether there were criminal charges to bring, and they just basically weren't able to do it. And so without even having a child care worker, you don't have any potential for foster care. And it's a terrible mess, and especially small rural counties.
And Brad Knoll has been very astute in pointing out one that we've not discussed, and that's a rifle range in Eastern Panhandle.
Brad's going down with the ship on that one. Mr. Carl.
Well, I can't disagree with anything that's been said, but you remember this is a discretion of the governor, and being cynical about his motivations. I think the one that Bill mentioned about the teacher pay raise could hit the list.
Joe, circles back to you.
Well, let me just say about the governor, I think it's been shameful. This is a guy who declared an emergency last summer regarding our jail system. And here we are a year later. And what has his administration proposed other than to look at the legislature and say, you guys figure it out, and then I'll make the call on the special session? Where's the leadership here from his office and his administration on that very issue that he declared an emergency in? I just found that to be really poor behavior, poor performance on his part and his administration. I hope they tackle that in August, but I think there's other issues, and it just strikes me as odd that we keep touting how much money we have Yet there seems to be some serious needs out there that could use that money, and yet we don't seem to be inclined to want to help in some areas. I don't understand that.
Go ahead, Bill.
Another point. Just breaking news: the judge has declared May the 24th to start the Trump classified document case, right when the election season is going full swing.
May 24th.
Wow.
May 24th.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? We've got just about 30 seconds left, but Mike, I want to go to you because you're a delegate. Is there urgency right now in the state to fix the corrections problem and the foster care problem?
I think there is, especially the corrections. I think there's urgency, and they've been working on this all summer. And I think probably here in the Panhandle, somebody that would probably know more than anybody is probably Jason Barrett, who I think sits on that committee on the Senate side and has been in these meetings and in these discussions and would be able to tell us how far along we are in negotiations and whether we're close to some hopefully solution.
Final thoughts. We begin on the phone with Joey Torts Ferretti.
For all the damage Dan Snyder did, he only gets $6 billion.
Larry Schultz.
Tomorrow's going to be a low of 59 in the morning, making me hark back to Canada. Everybody get out and enjoy that weather. It'll only probably last till 7:30 in the
A
morning.
lot of our
But get
commenting
out
community
there.
says you should go back to Canada.
Hey,
Joe Stubblefield.
It's fun to see how high Mike Carl and Mike Height jumped when Larry throws out red meat to
Mike
them.
Carl.
Except for the height difference, there could have been a
The
tip.
Cards returned to the top of the National League Central. Started with they moved ahead of the Bucks, and now they're playing the Cubs.
No time for you, Mike Height. It's 10 o'clock. The Dave Ramsey Show is next. This is Talk Radio, WRI Martinsburg and TV 10. We'll talk to get in 70 short hours.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. This is CBS News on the Hour, presented by Indeed.com.